You know what is funny about the whole Mars thing? Not funny like a joke, funny like watching someone confidently walk toward a wall in the dark and being absolutely certain they are going to hit it. Because the enthusiasm, the corporate presentations, the rockets with their beautiful logos, all of it sits on top of a foundation of physics that nobody is being honest about. And I find that deeply uncomfortable, because the physics does not care about your enthusiasm. The physics has been sitting there, written into the structure of the universe since the first atoms cooled, and it is completely indifferent to your 5-year plan. Let me tell you what Mars actually is. Mars is not a second home waiting to be decorated. It is not a backup drive for civilization. It is a 4-billion-year-old demonstration, written in frozen iron oxide and poison soil, of what the universe does to rocky worlds that lose their internal heat too quickly. It is a monument, a cold, airless, radioactive monument to thermodynamic inevitability. And the reason I want you to understand that is not to make you feel hopeless. It is because the truth, even when it is brutal, is always more interesting than the comfortable story being sold to you. So let us actually talk about the physics, not the inspirational version, the real version. There is an analogy that I think captures this situation with almost painful precision. Imagine, deep in the Mariana Trench, there lives a community of organisms. They have evolved over millions of generations to exist in a very specific thermodynamic pocket. The pressure around them is crushing by surface standards, somewhere around 11,000 pounds per square inch. The temperature is just above freezing. The chemistry of the water around them, the salinity, the oxygen content, the specific mineral composition of the hydrothermal vents they depend on, all of it is woven into what they are at the cellular level. Their membranes, their enzymes, their ATP synthesis, their entire biological machinery is tuned to that environment, the way a piano is tuned to a specific tension and temperature. It is not that they prefer it. They are physically constituted by it. Now imagine those organisms decide to migrate, not to a nearby vent, not to a slightly different depth. They decide to colonize the summit of Mount Everest. You immediately understand the absurdity, and yet you might say, well, they could build a pressurized container and bring their water with them. And I would say yes, and now you are beginning to understand the actual problem. Because the moment you put a living system inside an artificial container and transport it to an alien thermodynamic environment, you have not solved the problem, you have reframed it. You have replaced a biological impossibility with an engineering one, and engineering impossibilities are just biological impossibilities written in metal and plastic, and they degrade faster. Mars is that mountain summit, and we are those deep-sea creatures. The entire history of our biology, every protein, every hormone, every calibration of our immune system, our bone density maintenance, our cardiovascular architecture, all of it was written by evolution inside a very specific planetary physics experiment. One gravity, a strong magnetic cocoon, a thick nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere absorbing the worst of the solar radiation. A biosphere cycling nutrients through soil and water and atmosphere in loops so ancient and efficient that no engineer alive could reproduce even a fraction of them. That is what we are made of. That is not a metaphor. That is molecular reality. Now let us talk about the first wall, the wall of getting there. There is an equation. It is called the Tsiolkovsky rocket equation, and it is one of the most quietly devastating things in all of applied physics. What it tells you, in precise mathematical terms, is the relationship between the final velocity of a rocket and the ratio of its initial mass to its final mass. And what falls out of this equation if you stare at it long enough is something genuinely nightmarish. The amount of propellant you need grows exponentially with the velocity change you require, not linearly, exponentially. What this means in practice is that a significant fraction of any rocket launched to Mars is not the ship, it is not the habitat, it is not the food, or the water, or the shielding, or the medical equipment. It is propellant, and the propellant that moves the propellant, and the propellant that moves that propellant. You end up in a recursive loop of mass that punishes you more severely the more mass you try to move. This is not a funding problem. This is not an engineering problem waiting for a clever solution. This is the geometry of energy in a universe governed by inertia and gravity. It is baked in. Now add the radiation shielding. Because you cannot send biological organisms through interplanetary space without protection, and meaningful protection against galactic cosmic rays requires mass, dense mass. Lead, polyethylene, water, it does not matter. Anything that stops high-energy particles is heavy, and heavy is precisely the thing the rocket equation is punishing you for. So you add shielding, and the shielding increases your mass, and increasing your mass demands more propellant, and more propellant increases your mass further. The equation closes around you like a physical trap. Every solution you try makes the problem larger. And people say, well, what about nuclear propulsion? What about solar sails? What about ion drives? These are real technologies, some of them genuinely promising for certain narrow applications, and none of them change the fundamental accounting. They change the specific numbers in the equation. They do not remove the equation. Moving large amounts of complex biological mass across interplanetary distances remains a problem that sits at the absolute boundary of what chemical and thermodynamic systems can accomplish, and the boundary does not move because we want it to. Now let us talk about the second wall, the one that does not care how clever your spacecraft is. Mars has a radius of roughly half that of Earth. Its mass is about 11% of Earth's, and because of those numbers, its interior cooled far more quickly than ours did. The smaller the object, the faster it loses its internal heat to the surrounding void. This is basic thermodynamics. Large, hot objects retain heat. Small ones do not. Earth is still geologically active. Mars is not. Its core solidified. The convective churning that used to drive a global magnetic dynamo stopped, and when it stopped, the magnetic field collapsed. I want you to understand what a magnetic field actually does for a planet's inhabitants. It is not a decoration. It is not a gravitational accessory. It is the thing that stands between the surface and a continuous invisible bombardment of some of the most energetic particles in the galaxy. Galactic cosmic rays are not like the radiation from a hospital X-ray machine. They are atomic nuclei, sometimes whole iron atoms, accelerated to within a tiny fraction of the speed of light by supernova shockwaves and rotating neutron stars across the galaxy. They carry energies measured in giga-electron volts and tera-electron volts. They slice through matter. They pass through your walls. They pass through your habitats. They pass through you. When a high-energy cosmic ray nucleus passes through biological tissue, it leaves a track of ionization. It breaks chemical bonds. It creates free radicals. It fractures the backbone of DNA strands. The cell can repair some of this damage. It has mechanisms for that, evolved over billions of years living under Earth's protective shield. But at the dose rates present on the Martian surface, the damage accumulates faster than repair mechanisms can compensate. Over months and years, you are looking at a systematic dismantling of genetic integrity. Elevated cancer risk, yes, but also cellular aging, immune disruption, and damage to the central nervous system that no habitat wall made of any material we can practically launch from Earth will stop. This is not a solvable shielding problem with current or near-future materials. You would need meters of water or regolith between you and the sky at all times. You would have to live underground. And living underground on Mars, buried beneath radioactive perchlorate-soaked soil, while depending entirely on machines to recycle your air and water and maintain pressure and grow your food, is a life lived entirely at the mercy of failure probabilities accumulating over time. Every component degrades. Every seal eventually leaks. Every system has a mean time to failure. The question becomes not whether something will break, but how many things will break simultaneously before you can fix them. Which brings us to the third wall, and in some ways the most philosophically interesting one. The second law of thermodynamics tells you something that no amount of engineering enthusiasm can bypass. In any closed system, entropy increases, disorder grows. Energy becomes less available for doing useful work. This is not a tendency. It is not a statistical preference. It is the direction in which time moves for any physical system operating in the universe. You cannot build a perfectly efficient recycling loop. You will always lose something. Heat will escape. Molecules will degrade into forms that cannot be fully recaptured. Trace contaminants will accumulate. Now put a human colony of 30 or 100 or even 1,000 people in a closed habitat on Mars and watch this law do its work. They exhale carbon dioxide and metabolic water vapor. They produce solid waste containing complex organic molecules. They shed skin cells and bacteria. The plants they grow consume nutrients from a soil medium that must somehow be continuously replenished because Martian soil, the actual regolith, is permeated with perchlorates, reactive chlorine compounds that are toxic to most biological systems, and that make the prospect of using native Martian soil for agriculture a chemistry problem of staggering difficulty. The metals in their habitat walls experience fatigue from the thermal cycling between the brutal cold of the Martian night and the slightly less brutal cold of the Martian day. The lubricants in their machinery degrade. The seals in their pressure doors harden and crack. Each of these losses is individually small, but they are not individually recoverable. A closed system leaking entropy in 1,000 small ways simultaneously is not a system that fails dramatically all at once. It is a system that becomes progressively more fragile, more dependent on external inputs that cannot be delivered from 94 million miles away on any useful timescale, and eventually reaches a threshold where a single failure cascades into several, and several into many. There is no cavalry. There is no resupply mission fast enough. Light itself takes between 3 and 22 minutes to cross the distance between Earth and Mars, depending on the orbital geometry, and radio signals travel at the speed of light. When something breaks, you fix it with what you have, or you do not fix it. The supply chain from Earth is measured in months, with launch windows that open for a few weeks every 26 months. The math of survival in that context is not encouraging. What I find genuinely beautiful about all of this, beautiful in the way that a very honest and very austere equation is beautiful, is what it tells us about the relationship between life and physics. Life is not generic. It is not portable. It is not a program you can run on any hardware. It is an expression of the specific, highly improbable, extraordinarily finely tuned physical conditions of a particular planet at a particular moment in its geological history. Our biology is not visiting Earth. Our biology is Earth, thinking about itself. The oxygen in your lungs was produced by organisms that have been cycling it through this biosphere for over 2 billion years. The calcium in your bones was weathered out of ancient rock by water and biology working together over geological timescales. The nitrogen in your proteins was fixed from the atmosphere by bacteria living in soil that took millions of years to build from the remnants of organisms that came before. You are not an organism that lives on Earth. You are a temporary, walking concentration of Earth itself, organized by the physics of this specific place. And what I think is the most profound realization available to a species that has actually figured out how to measure and understand its own universe is not that the cosmos is hostile to our expansion. It is that our singular, irreplaceable home is so astonishingly improbable, so perfectly calibrated by the blind arithmetic of physics and time, that protecting it and understanding it and living inside it with full appreciation of what it is demands more intelligence, more wonder, and more genuine courage than any rocket launch ever could. The boundary that physics draws around us is not a cage. It is the signature of a universe that organized itself into something that can perceive its own existence, right here, on this one cooling rock, for exactly as long as we choose to take care of it.